Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. Before we get started, please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment if you want to. Go to www.legendthesuperstitionmountains.com, check out our website. There's shirts, there's hats, there's coffee cups. It's pretty cool. Got the bark notes over there. So let's get into this week. Now, Trevor's going to remember this story in a fictional sense because I ran it by him. And at the end, I'll kind of explain that. But it was something that truly, really happened. And the best fiction is based on something that actually really happened, I guess. So I figure it's got to be 91, 92. I've been working in and out of Tucson. And on the way back to Phoenix one day, I'd come back sometimes midweek, sometimes the end of the week. And I decided to go through Florence instead of coming into Phoenix. Now, I don't know who could have been the traffic, could have been a number of different reasons. Maybe I just wanted to different drive on the way home. Much longer route coming home, but it could have been and I remember I was off early Friday. I was got up Friday, hey, don't have to work today. We're going to cut out of here in an hour or two. I think the guy I was working for had something else, other business to attend to, so it was have a good weekend. So I took off, went up through Florence, and on the way through, I realized, you know what? Pretty much got Friday off. I got nothing better to do. I'm going to pull in, take a hike in the Superstitions. I didn't have my gear and stuff, but I thought I'd go out for an hour or two, just kind of go for a walk. So I went down Peralta. Now, this is back in the day. There was a time you could go down the road and down Peralta and go down the road to the quarter circle U. Go through the gate, shut the gate behind you, go through the quarter circle U, always wave if you saw someone. And the gate on the far side, you'd open it and drive through, shut the gate, and you could continue down. Now they have, and I'm sure it's still there was a corral and a well down just before you hit the wilderness boundary on the east end. And you would go down there, and that would be the trail you could get to go to Coffee Flat, Castle Rock, or you could go out to Reed's Water, Soldiers' Graves out that way, the trails. So I went out there just figuring I'm going to walk and kind of just walk for a while, and then I'm just going to cut up a drainage or something, a wash. And I'll just walk, and then when I'm kind of okay, that's enough, I'll just walk back, and then I'll leave. So there was no drive, no intention, no reason, no purpose. It was just get out, I'll walk around, explore an area I haven't been in. And it'll just be a random picking area. It was a nice day. So I went out, got in this wash, I start working my way down it. And I'm watching the walls because a lot of people would prospect. And there'd be a lot of prospects along. You could look at the walls and stuff to see if someone was working in one of these washes. And I wasn't really finding anything. I remember I walked for a while, and if anyone who knows me knows, one of my pet peeves is walking in sand. I hate sand. I'm not a beach guy, and I'm not a wash guy. I always would go down washes because you could push out coyotes and rabbits and stuff when hunting. But in this case, I got kind of tired of slugging through, the bushwhacking down through and cutting and trying to find my way through when it would be overgrown. Decided, okay, you know what, I'm going to turn and head back, but I'm going to climb out of here. And I'm going to go along the ridge and slowly start working my way back. The idea would be, I'm on the west side, and then what I'm going to do is start going southwesterly. I'm either going to hit one of the trails going back, or I'm going to basically hit the site. Because you can see the mountain, you can tell where you're at. So I started walking back, and I'm walking along, and I remembered that I looked out in the corner of my eye, saw something, and I was like, what was I looking at? And it was like a right-angled object. And I was like, that's weird. There's nothing out here. And I'm looking over, and I can't, but I can see something just like a corner, and I'm like, is that natural? I don't know. So I decided to work my way over that way. It was a little ways off. And I was like, maybe I'm just seeing it wrong, because sometimes it's a little bit of an optical illusion of where you're standing and everything. So I started working, and I could tell it was like something frame. I'm like, am I looking at like a sheet of plywood standing up? I don't see any other dimensions to it, so it's just kind of odd. And I would lose it as I was walking that way. I would kind of lose it and then back up and kind of start heading back towards where I kind of lost sight of it. And I didn't understand why it was disappearing out of my view, and then I would kind of see a little bit of a shape again, and so I finally got over, and I walk up on it. It's not much of a clearing area. There's creosote and grass and stuff, and not quite in the center of this area, but there's a door, and it's in the door frame, and it's just standing there. And I walk up, and I'm thinking, oh, there must have been a structure, and I'm looking at the ground, but I don't see any trace that there had been any structure there. But there is a door frame, and it's a 6'8" door, 6'8" normal standard door. And it's got a door frame. It's probably a 30". I don't think it was quite a normal 32" door. And I was just looking at it, and it was a solid core door, which means it was a solid slab of wood. But it's not an entry door, I could tell that. And I was just kind of looking at it. It's not 1 3/4". It's probably 1 3/8". I could just kind of, I know doors. I was a trim carpenter. So I'm kind of looking at it and going, it's kind of weird. And I went and knocked on it, not to see if somebody would answer, but I knocked on it, and I could tell it's a solid core door. Now that's a more expensive door. So it'd be a solid piece of wood, and it probably within inside of it, or on the outside, might have a veneer finished overlaid on it. I couldn't really tell. And I'm looking at it, it's hinged. And the hinges are very old. I couldn't tell you what type they were. They were interior hinges, smaller hinge sets. But I was like, this is just weird. And it's framed. And I remember pushing on it, and they must have cemented it in the ground because it was pretty solid. So, of course, I do what we all do. And I have to, in a reflection, think back of like Space Odyssey 2001 and the monkeys going around the obelisk. And I had to be kind of doing that, checking it out, looking at it. I didn't lick it, but I tried the door handle. And, of course, it doesn't turn. And I'm like, okay, it feels like it's locked. And it did jiggle a little, but it's rusted. It's just old. It must have been, I don't know if it wouldn't have been brass, but it was very rusted and crusted. And I'm just looking at it, and I'm looking down. There's no threshold on it, which further substantiates that it's an interior door. And I'm looking at it, and I'm just going, this makes no sense. And I'm trying to think, what if someone had a wall tent, and they used that at the opening of the wall tent and left it here? Well, there's no threshold. Anything could get under there, because there's probably a gap like this. And I don't know of a wall tent that would have the open spacing of 6'8", because that's the standard door height. So I'm just again kind of like, man, this is just kind of weird. So I'm just kind of looking at the whole thing like, man, this is. So I walked around it a number of times, kind of tried jiggling the handle, realized the lock set's more what I remembered the lock sets of the interior doors at my grandparents' house, which they had doors probably in the 50s or 60s, and they weren't skeleton keys, but the keys were different. So I was looking at the lock. At that point, I hadn't learned how to pick locks. Not that I was a thief, but I got actually trained in the hardware division and being a trim carpenter of working with the hardware and locks and lock sets. So I realized it's probably a simple thing, but I don't really, at that point, I didn't understand. It wouldn't probably have tumblers. It was probably just, I could have had something, put it in there and twisted it. I don't know if I had anything with me. But I'm realizing, okay, this is, probably would be kind of interesting to talk to someone and see what they think. Well, the door was so old and had been weathered that you could see where it was starting to fall apart, break apart. So I reached up and I was able to get a chunk of it. It was kind of the surface of it. And I got a good chunk out of it, 2-3 inches by a couple inches. And it had a little depth to it, but it broke, I was able to break it off of there. And I felt bad, but it was so weathered, it was ridiculous. I put it in my pocket and I walked out, and I remember I was thinking about it all the way out. Like, wow, that's kind of not a light door, so it would have, God, who would take it back? And those are a little higher end doors, so where would someone get it? It's just interesting. And I couldn't look at it too detailed because obviously it was locked and shut. So I went back home, kind of forget the whole thing, put the chunk of wood up on something, a shelf. And then one day I was looking at it and I thought, I'm going to have to check around and see if anybody could tell me what kind of wood this is. So I went into work, took it in. There was a guy there. His name was Rex or Rick or something. And I asked him, and he kind of got it, and what's this? And I said, well, I'm just trying to figure out what kind of wood. And I didn't really tell him the story. And he was like sniffing it and feeling it and looking at it. And he says, I'm pretty sure it's a red cedar. And I said, that'd be kind of like expensive for a good slab of cedar. And I would think, and he's like, yeah. And then I told him the story. And he became very interested. Said, well, you should probably go out there. It'd be interesting. That door wouldn't be that hard to pick. A couple things you could bring along and get that door to trip. But it'd be really interesting to see if you could get the hinges to unbind and open up. So he was like, why don't we go out? We'll take some WD-40 or something, try to loosen it up, and we'll try to get it, and just kind of look at it and see what this door's all about. Okay, I'm game for it. It was a week or 2 or 3 later, we finally made the plan, and we drove out. Went out there, it wasn't a hard walk. And we start going down the wash, and I'm like, okay, and I kind of remember the spot I go up, and then we start crossing across. And I said, okay, it was along here, about here. Now, there's nothing to really mark it. We spent 4 or 5 hours, could not find the door. Never found it. I've been out there a couple times since. I don't even know if it would be there. Somebody. I even asked Howard Hornick about it, if he ever ran across it, and he looked at me like I was crazy. I know we were in the general area, but everything kind of out in there, each wash, everything looks the same. I know I was in the right wash. I know we came out of the wash about where I did, so I know all that was right. But on the way back, I was just kind of veering around, kind of working my way back. So there was no real kind of path. It was not even the path of least resistance. I was just walking, and then once I saw it, remember, when I was walking to it, I kept losing track of it and having to back. And so somewhere in all that, I never could find it again. It could still be out there. It could be laying on the ground, for I know. I don't think it'd be worth it anything. But it is a curious thing. I've asked people over time. No one had ever seen it. I knew I wasn't crazy because I had that piece of wood I showed the guy. So I knew it was actually something I physically found. Now, here is the interesting point. This is probably 3-4 years ago. Trevor will nod kind of maybe if he remembers it. So I ran him an idea of like, hey, what if someone found a door in the desert and it's just standing there and you open it and you walk through it and you end up in the back. Trevor's nodding now. And I said, that'd be a cool little fictional thing. Now, I was a big fan of Stephen King's Dark Tower series. Gunslinger's one of my favorite books, the first book of that. And that has a thing about doors going into other worlds and stuff. This, I was thinking, kind of that principle, but a little different. But this door in the Superstitions mirrored that. And I ran it by Trevor and said, hey, why don't we do something, do a short little fictional film based on this idea and all. And Trevor said, nah, I don't think so. And we didn't do it. And I came back to him actually a year or so later with the same idea, saying, what if a guy goes through like his bathroom door and he ends up, it's like he's in the mirror, he looks back, he sees the desert, he walks through the doorway and he walks through this door into the desert and all this stuff. Maybe we can figure out some way this works, with the whole thing and all. And again, Trevor looked at me like, I don't think so. And he remembers this. He's nodding. He told me, not a great idea. Now, you guys all filled the comments saying, that sounds like a tremendous idea and a cool film to do. Trevor wasn't thrilled with the idea of getting a door frame, sticking it in the desert, which you only need to do it in one day and you shoot all the different sequences and you're done. But that was the idea, and it came from that idea. So Trevor knows now it was the Stephen King thing, but I always thought, well, that stupid door I found in the Superstitions, it would make sense. So I don't know. We did have a door at the house for a while. I thought it looked more like that door. It was a solid core, but this was only a 24-inch, but I had a solid core 24-inch alder door. And I thought it wasn't as weathered, but I thought it looked far more like the door than cedar. Of course, you wouldn't have been able to smell the cedar as much as it had been outside and everything. But Rick, or whoever it was, seemed to feel it was cedar, which is, I think, a softer wood. The alder is a pretty hard wood. and a pretty expensive door. But I would think either one in a solid core would be hard to get. But that's the story of we're going to just go with Rex, whatever. Go with the red cedar door on that. So if you're ever out in Barkley Basin, out going towards Reed's Water, and you're out and you see something you think is a right angle or something, you walk out. Maybe you'll find it. Maybe someone will find it laying down and say, hey, there's that. The trim was just pretty much normal pine, so it would have been normal in that. But I was pretty familiar with the workings of doors, and it's still stuck in my mind of who would take something that heavy that far out, stick it in there like that, and there's nothing else. There's no trace. I searched the area after I'd found the door. I looked around the area. There was no sign that anybody else had been out there, so it's just this door standing out in the mountains by itself. And it would be particularly really cool if it still was. Nothing I did to it that would say, well, you would find a chunk. There's a chunk on it's a right-handed door, so when you go to open it to swing in, the handle's on your right side. If you're standing on the inside of it, the hinges would be on your right side. That's a right-handed door. So the chunk missing out of it is above the doorknob about eye level on the right-hand side. So if you found the door and you found that chunk missing out of it, that would be my door. Of course, if you found a red cedar or alder door in the Superstition Mountains standing out there, I don't think you need the chunk of wood to determine that was the same wood or the same one I found, because to find a second one completely would be ridiculous. So there you go. There's this week's story. A little mysterious, something for people to go find if you can. The access is cut down out there, but if you're ever heading out to Castle Rock and you decide to detour down and start going south, maybe someday somebody will run into that thing, and maybe somebody else someday will have a story or explain what that door was doing out there. There you go. Hope you visit the website. Hope you continue to check the channels. Thank you, everybody, for coming into the lives. Thank you for joining this week. And one thing, most important thing, you all know what it is, and you all do remember. I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.